Okay, today on What Happened to Noah Presgrove, we have two special guests. We have two people you've seen before on the podcast. We have Ashley Chadwick, who is Noah's cousin, and we also have Jodi Barth, who has been, if anybody who's been watching and listening to our podcast, she was helped us with the Molly and Colt case, still helping us with the Molly and Colt case. And we thought it was really, we were in Oklahoma this past week, and we got to meet all the family members in person and do some interviews personally with them. And we met Ashley. We went to her house, and it was great to see her and hear her story. And what we learned about Ashley is that she's digging deep in this. This whole family is not giving up on this case. They will not give up in this case. And Ashley has taken it to another level, and she's really doing deep dives. And a lot like Paula did with Molly and Colt. And those two actually met like a week and a half ago. So that was interesting too. And you can talk a little bit about that. But first of all, thank you, ladies, for being on. And Ashley, we wanted to bring Jodi on for you because we wanted you to kind of get it from the horse's mouth as far as any questions you have about Noah's injuries, the autopsy report, or also Jodi's, she's a skilled investigator, over 30 years of experience, and she's done hundreds of death investigations, both, homicides and also traffic accidents. So this is a perfect opportunity to kind of ask your questions and whatever that's been brewing in your head as you pour over this information on a daily basis, sometimes an hourly basis, as we've been talking to you every day since this started, even when we were in Oklahoma. So thank you for being on, and this is, the stage is yours, Ashley.
Yeah. First off, thanks, Jodi. Thanks for taking the time and looking into all of this. This is definitely not our everyday life, but now it's became our everyday life.
Right.
So I just appreciate all the intel that you could give us, and I'll pick your brain.
Be my guest. Anything I can do to help, I'm here.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So first off, on how before the autopsy report and all those things, let's go to the scene and let's talk about that. When you first arrive to a scene, whether it's in your medical background or in the law enforcement background, how would you be able to handle that? What would you do exactly first?
The very first thing you do is secure the scene. Bottom line, you've got to prevent, every time something happens, there's an interaction between people. Evidence is brought in, evidence is taken out. There's always a transfer of evidence. So you want to stop that scene cold where it is. So you want to prevent anybody else from coming in, prevent anything from going out. You want to stop it where it is. That's the first thing. So the next thing after that, after you get the scene secured, then you start documenting what it is that you see there. Just as it is. You don't add to it. You don't take away from it. You document it by photographs. You document it by sketching. You do what we call field sketches, which are exactly that. It's a rough drawing, but your measurements are correct, so that when you get back into a controlled environment like your office or your lab, you can reproduce that to scale if you need to, but you can create a permanent and lifelike, basically, sketch of the scene. So you want to document it, and then, and only then, do you start processing it. So you need to find out so you want to document who's there when you get there, when they got there, who they are, all of their identifiers. You want to make sure you know all of that, who's there, and you keep them there as long as you have to. You keep them there. And then once you have all that done, then you start processing, which is generally what I would do is I would take a complete walkthrough first. My hands in my pocket, not doing anything, just trying to get a lay of the land. If I can see a point where I want to start and a point where I want to end, and kind of figure my path. And then I do that. I start at the beginning and I would go very, just right in lockstep down the road. And at that point, you'll be collecting evidence, you'll be bagging it, you'll be boxing it, you'll be noting on it, you'll be doing your fingerprint. If you have to do fingerprints at the scene, normally we like to have a more controlled environment, but sometimes you don't have that opportunity. You have to do it there. So that's, so the last thing you basically do is process the scene before you release everything. The body would normally stay there in place until I was done with it. In some instances, depending on the circumstances, you might want to do the body and around the body first, so you can remove the body from the scene. But I don't really like doing that if I don't have to. I liked taking it in order, but there are times, for whatever reasons, that you want to do that. You're alongside a busy highway. You don't want that sitting out there all day if you don't have to. You understand what I'm saying about that? So,
Yes.
yeah. So that's basically it. You secure the scene, you document the scene, you process the scene. And that includes anybody that's there.
And that's whenever you start getting information, you're taking their name, number, point of contact.
Right.
And you would also be taking photos of that scene. And if there was anything that you were collecting as evidence in your bagging and such, you're photographing that prior to placing those things into a bag to send on to wherever.
Right. You always photograph in place. You don't add to, you don't take away. Now, there are times where you will want to add in a device like a scale, so you can blow that photograph up to life size as you need, but you always make sure that you have photographs of it naturally without that scale. So you'll always have what you're seeing is what that photograph is going to show. And sometimes you'll even photograph it after it's removed, but not everything you do that with, but you might want to, depending what you're looking at. But yes, you always photograph before you move anything.
And this is with your medical background and your law enforcement background. You would do it for both takes?
Well, yeah, I would, because I don't even separate mine. One builds on the other. So I started out as a deputy coroner. So I come from that angle, because we're looking for meth as a deputy coroner, or as a coroner, you're looking for manner and cause of death. So I'm looking at it from that aspect. But then I go into the CSI mode, which is documenting the scene, processing that scene for recreation. We want to be able to say what happened before, during, and after that event took place. That's your goal. And law enforcement, as a detective division commander and a detective for a lot of years, of course, I'm thinking about interviews and information. So all of that comes into play.
So Ashley, knowing what you know about Noah's scene and what I've learned this week from everyone, and from Dalen, who was there, and you from the aftermath, what happened? Let's just start from the beginning with Noah's scene. When Dalen got there, there was a lot of people running around. The scene wasn't secure, was it?
No, the scene was not secure. And there were different parents that have arrived to the scene. There's different coming and going of people, where they were volunteer fire department, the highway department. In order to block the highway, they were still coming and going. The scene was not secure at all.
Yeah, I mean, and we were on that road, and we
Mhm.
were right where Noah's body was found, like literally 2 days ago. And that's a road. It's a straight, flat road on Highway 81, north-south, just 2 lanes with a very shallow shoulder, not that big of a shoulder. And people go, I would say the average is like 65, 70 on that road. They do not go slow. And that's trucks, that's cars, and it's right up against a railroad track as well. So we got a really good idea how small that area was, and to have all those people and elements there, must have been very confusing.
And then
Oh,
go ahead,
so-
Jodi.
so just so you know, even in a normal scene, and I shouldn't say a normal because this should be a normal scene too, but in any scene, you might have a lot of people coming and going. But what you should have is a perimeter set up where no one goes through that except for who's supposed to be in there. And somebody on the outside of that perimeter documenting who's coming and going and the times they're there and what, when they get there, when they leave, who they are, their purpose for being there. All of that should be documented separately, even if you're not inside the scene.
Did that happen?
Not at all. Yeah, there was
It's too bad.
there was very lack of documentation.
The crime scene photos too. Jodi, in your experience, does the family get to see those photos if they request them?
I think, I don't know that there's any kind of a law that says they can or can't, but when you're working with family, I mean, I would certainly, if they wanted to see them, I would show them. I would, there might be some I would recommend they didn't look at least initially, but I would work with the family as much as I could. I mean, I'm not saying that they should share everything with the family right up front. Don't get me wrong. There are things when you're doing an investigation that you really don't know where you're going for a while. You're just starting it and you don't want to burn any bridges. You don't want to say something to somebody that's going to affect your case down the road. But I certainly would always include the family whenever I could. So Now, as far as like excuse me, if the coroner took photographs, I don't know that they would release those. They might let them see them, but I don't know if they would release them. When
that's what
I
I'm
was
saying. It's like they would see them, they would bring them into the office and they could show them.
Right.
They wouldn't just do it by the people.
Right. I think that's I'm not sure of Oklahoma law, but I'm not aware of any laws that prohibit that, at least in my history. But I would always include the family in something like this. They have a hard enough time going through stuff than to have to wonder about things that they really shouldn't have to wonder about.
Yeah. Well,
It's just how I feel.
They have a unique experience because one of their family members is a medical examiner in another state. And I believe from what we know that she requested for them to see them, the photographs. And I would think that would be and she says she's done it in prior cases with other municipalities and other districts, and she had no problem getting it. I mean, does that happen sometimes? Is that a legitimate request that could be honored between one ME to the other, especially if someone has a connection to the case?
Well, I think looking at the photographs would be no problem. Releasing the photographs could potentially be a legal problem down the road if you ever have to go to trial. Because when you go to trial, every photograph, the negatives, at least in my day, because we had negatives to show, the negatives had to be introduced, and the photographs had to be introduced at trial. And you have to show a chain of evidence, and you don't want that to be broken in any way, shape, or form. So there's any question of manipulation or anything like that. So I wouldn't, if I had an open and active investigation, I would never release photographs or release negatives to anybody other than the law enforcement agency and the state's attorney who's handling the case. But showing the photographs to an ME, I don't see where that would be a problem.
Yeah, because we do know that they took a lot of photographs. They flew a drone for the area and stuff like that. So they did document the scene, when they got there. The problem is that by the time they got there, the scene kind of changed from initially when the first person who rolled up on there,
Right.
a couple times, because they said his shorts were found in the middle of the roadway, and he was naked. And then we found out that, Jack had picked up the shorts when he got there and put them in the back of his bed of his pickup, and then later on took him out of there and then basically dropped him next to Noah's body. Now he may have been doing this because he didn't just know what to do. He's a young kid, saw his shorts in the middle of the road, didn't want them to get run over or anything like that, and didn't know what to do with it and just put them in there. But, we since then have not been able to hear from Jack to say why he did that. But I'm sure he had some sort of reasoning for doing that. But I think he realized he maybe shouldn't have them, and he put them there next to the body. But just that, let alone that there was that period of time, I think someone said there was a good 30 minutes where there was no law enforcement or anybody there. There was just the people who stopped, the truck driver, the two people named Tyler who showed up on the scene. And we've heard, some of his statements, and we read about his statements that he's made. But and then 911 was called after that. And so OHP, I think the sheriff got there probably within a half hour. Mm-hmm. And I think Ashley, tell us what when you asked the sheriff, I think you told us that how much time that they had before anybody of law enforcement was there.
He said there was a 30-minute window of anybody official with the agency or law enforcement before the undersheriff arrived.
Right. So, right. It's a lot of time, but that's why it's so important to document who's there, when they came, when they left, even after the fact. Because, for instance, in some scenes, you'll have maybe EMS coming in. Maybe you don't know that, maybe it's not quite evident that the body is deceased. So you want somebody to come in with medical knowledge there. If there's a chance that they're still alive, that they can get help. That disrupts the scene, but that's something you can't really, you have to do. But the important thing is, who those people are. If they leave footprints, you can rule them out. If they leave fingerprints, you can rule them out. If they leave a blood trail from taking the injured party away, you can figure that out. You can rule all that out. So that's why the documentation part is so important, because scenes aren't perfect. They're just not, they're not like in the movies. They're not perfect. So you want to be able to get to the base of it as quickly as possible. What happened? What was this like before anybody got here? And then if people did get here, what did they do? Did they change anything? You certainly want to know that. But once you know all that, once you know who they are, you can work around that. Does that make
What was the
sense?
most frustrating thing for you, Ashley, about the scene?
I think I don't know what isn't really. Probably the initial first security of the scene, because it was quite some time before a family member was actually there to be able to identify and be like, okay, that is him, he belongs to us, and all the things. But for me, it's definitely the lack of the security and the proper documentation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's key, as we know.
Right.
We've had the same experience with the Molly and Colt case where, you guys were initially, and fortunately you didn't have that protracted period of time that Molly and Colt did, because they were, for like a week, 2 weeks, they were saying they ran off and they went to Wichita Falls, and they were just missing. They just went and shacked up somewhere. And so for a good, say, week to 2 weeks, no one was really looking for them. And nothing was really being done as far as investigation. Same thing with you guys. You guys had a shorter window because they thought it was a hit and run initially until the OHP showed up. So you got probably like an hour and a half. So they were kind of treating it, he was probably, even the sheriff said, it looks like a hit and run. Everybody was saying it was a hit and run. So it was like they treat that. I mean, but to me, I don't understand why you would treat a hit and run differently than you would if it was something with foul play. Tell me about that, Jodi. Would you do that?
No, you want to assume that it's a homicide right from the get-go and work that way. You don't ever want to assume it's a hit and run. You don't want to assume it's an accident. You don't want to assume it's a suicide. You want to work it like a homicide every time.
Yeah. Because even if it was a hit and run, it's basically it is a homicide. It's you hitting with a car. It's a deadly weapon.
But it wasn't a hit and run, and they know that.
Right.
Well,
So the crime scene photos, did anyone else around see them, Ashley?
Anyone else, like as in the family or just
Outside? I mean,
siblings?
you guys haven't seen them, have you?
No, we haven't seen anything like any form of fashion, whether it was law enforcement, whether it was the medical examiner, whether it was the volunteer fire department. But it has been told that there was some leak of some photos that went around, as far as it being sent to us or any of that nature. No, but it was a volunteer fire department that apparently leaked these photos, that took the pictures on his phone and sent them to a spouse, and then there you go. It's a domino effect at that point. It's the small town gossip, and it was going to some of these kids. And I know that my cousin Robin had made a phone call to the high school and to let them know, like, hey, apparently there's some photos going around, but I want to let you guys be aware because my child still attends this high school. So I do know that.
So with cell phones, that today, that would be, I mean, I didn't have to deal with that, but too much, not till the later years. But today, with as many people as were there, and I can't believe all those kids walked out of that place without a cell phone in their pocket. I just can't believe they did. So I just wonder how many people took photographs even before law enforcement got there.
Something I've always wondered too, and Ashley, maybe you can answer this question. Obviously Noah had a cell phone. Was his cell phone ever recovered?
As far as I know, that they do have his cell phone.
Law enforcement does?
Mm-hmm. OHP does.
OHP.
And he just got that cell phone actually on Friday, the Friday before. And he got his own plan. However, he still had his old phone that was through his Nana's plan. And he had gotten his paycheck that Friday and went to the cell phone company and got his own. And before, I want to say he had an Android, and now after he went out onto his own, he got him a little fancy iPhone.
But they have those phones, most likely.
Yes.
Both phones?
For sure, one. I want to say both, but I have no idea.
So after spending time with you guys, it's so devastating what you guys have been through. And it's the passion that you all have to find justice. I mean, it's such an amazing family, Jodi, really. And we feel so, I mean, we've been crying all week. I've been crying all week with these people. And what can they do right now? It just feels like it's in this weird phase where it's like, what can they do?
So it's almost, if it seems like, and I know nothing of what the police know or what they've done or what they intend to do. It's still open, but they haven't made an arrest. So, I mean, as far as what the family can do, you always have, you can investigate on your own. You can hire a private investigator. You can, and I asked Rob this, but I'll ask you, was Noah buried?
Yes.
Was he buried? He was not cremated, right? He was buried. So the body, you still have the body, right?
Yes.
It's buried, and it was released to be buried. So that's something you might want to consider doing. I don't know the cost involved, but you might want to explore exhuming the body and getting a second autopsy with your own forensic pathologist, just to see what's there. I went back and looked through the autopsy report, and what I didn't notice is I didn't notice any sequencing of injuries. In other words, sometimes we can tell from physical evidence, whether it's fracture sites or exterior wounds like lacerations, defense wounds, that kind of thing. It might be, say, we're looking at bullet holes in a window, or, fragmentation of a windshield, and we want to know how many blows were issued. Sometimes we can sequence those by the fracture lines, or the wounds themselves. So you can tell which wound was suffered first, which wound came next, which wound came after that, because they'll intersect with each other. Fractures do the same thing. The first fracture will fracture out, then the next fracture will intersect with that, and then so on. It'll go. So it might give us some additional information. Was that head wound the first wound? I kind of think it was. I tend to think that was the first wound, which probably would have at least rendered him unconscious almost immediately. And then the rest came after that. I don't know what caused any of them, but I have my suspicions at this point. I just don't know. But you might want to consider something like that. That's something you certainly can do, is go ahead and get the body exhumed and do a second autopsy and see what they can tell from that. I certainly would continue pressing law enforcement for answers. I don't know why they wouldn't be forthcoming with you about this. If they're actively involved in the investigation and they've got leads and they're working it, they should tell you that. They don't have to tell you who,
Right.
And they don't have to tell you specifics, but it would be nice if they would at least give you some sort of hope or closure that, okay, we've got to do something else now.
Yeah. Well, I know I spoke to the guy, the OHP patrolman who was on the scene, who showed up and did the initial investigation, where they thought it was a hit and run, and he realized it wasn't a hit and run as soon as he looked at it. And he said it's an open investigation. They're actively looking into it. So he told me that. So,
right.
But whether or not, what they're doing and how they're passing that information on and speaking to you guys, I think he does speak to you guys, once in a while, but I don't know how much information they're offering to you guys to at least let you guys know that something's going to be done, or if they have any information. Ashley, can you speak to that at all?
He does. He's in close contact when it comes to Robin. That's our person that we felt was good one. She lives in the area, and if there was anything, she could be able to get over there quickly, or meet up with him, whatever the case may be. But we made her the point of contact, and because there should be 50 billion people trying to talk to this investigator, trying to figure everything out, and sit here and just tell us repeatedly. He has a full-time job, he has a life, and it just doesn't make sense for all of us to sit here and contact him. So, but they are in contact. He does tell her some things. So
yeah, and he's very. I have specific questions about the case and stuff like that. I've reached out to him, and he told me what he could tell me, and I'm pretty sure it's pretty much the same stuff that he's telling you guys. So that's I just I want to talk a little bit about Jodi before we came on the podcast. You sent some photographs. You kind of did a little bit of a deep dive into his head wound and looked at found some other autopsy photographs with similar head wounds in the back from different types of weapons, pistol, other types of things. We're not going to show the photographs. They're pretty graphic, but why don't you talk us through what you learned from that in relation to what you think happened to Noah?
Okay, so before we do that, I just want to, what I didn't tell you too, Ashley, is there's always the civil route to go as well, which is a tort, a state tort. And if you have an attorney, and I think the family does have an attorney, there's a civil route you can go. And what that would do is it's not criminal in nature. So your burden of proof is less. It's just a preponderance of evidence. And you're looking at probably a wrongful death type situation, something like that. But what that opens up is depositions and things like that. So that's maybe a route you might want to consider too, because that forces the information out.
Right.
In a court, in a legal situation, in a legal setting.
Right.
So that's the other one. As far as I'm sorry.
No, but you can use that. I think one thing you were telling me is that you can use that information if a criminal probe and a charge happens. You can use that in the criminal charge as well. Correct?
Yes, correct. And when you start doing that, that's all under oath. Those are depositions under oath, just like anything else. So that's sometimes a good avenue to go. What I found.
Hold on one second. Ashley, do you feel though that there is movement in the case? Do you feel that people are actually opening up a little bit more? Do you think that there's more movement than there's been? Because I feel like there is. I don't feel like.
Yes and no. Are we where we were when we began to now? No, like it's a slow process. It's not real fast, but there's some movement going.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, Jodi, go ahead and talk about the wounds.
Okay, so the wounds I looked at that I found, the one thing, I said this briefly before, but I feel like I need to repeat it. When you see the word laceration in a pathology report, in an autopsy report, most people, when they hear the word laceration, they think of a cut. And it's not a cut. In a pathology report or an autopsy report, a laceration is a blunt force injury. It occurs when the skin or an organ or whatever is hit by a blunt instrument so hard that the skin actually splits open. It's not sliced open. It actually splits open. So it's usually jagged. And when I saw the description of the head wound described as a fish-like wound, that stuck in my head, that I wondered if that was what we were looking at. So I started researching skull fractures. And specifically, I was looking at blunt force injury skull fractures. And I started seeing examples of skull fractures from the butts of weapons, of pistols and weapons. And in many cases, they had one end was split into a fish-like tail, and then the other end was straight or, jagged. But it had that split-like appearance. So unfortunately, I haven't been able to find any examples of golf club injuries or skull fractures. So I can't I can't see if there's any comparison. But I just think that might be a significant lead. The other thing that like I said, that I would really have liked to have seen is can we sequence any of those injuries? Can we see what came first and maybe what followed? It might give us, can we see the direction of force? I don't even know from the autopsy. I really can't pinpoint the direction of that head injury, but I know it was a scooping out type injury because I think it mentions some dried artifact that was still attached, which would probably be some skin that, was still attached at one end or another, but I can't really tell from just reading it. I'd have to see it.
How does a pathologist determine that? Can they determine that by visually seeing what the trajectory of the wound, like how it came in and where it started and where it finished it? And can they do that from some visual?
Sure. Yeah. And so I'm not in every case, maybe, but sure. That's certainly something you can do. I mean, you'll see a direction of travel. You can see even in knife wounds and cut wounds, sometimes you can tell where the wound began and where it ended. But in this particular case, I'd like to know the underlying structure other than just that there was a skull fracture. I'd like to know what that looked like underneath the scalp area. So They would, in an autopsy, they would dissect that down all the way to the brain. And I'd really like to know what that looked like underneath.
Yeah. Ashley, I know. Go ahead.
It seemed to me like it was very indicative of the surface wound that we saw or that we read about.
Yeah. Ashley, I know when his funeral, there was a closed casket because apparently from what we heard that some people were taking pictures of him there and you guys decided to close it. At least that's what we were told. Did the immediate family, did you have a chance to see Noah up close and were you able to see his head wound at all?
We did have a viewing the day prior, the day before his service, and it was, an open casket, and we were able to see his body, but he's clothed, and there was a hat that was on his head, so you couldn't see his actual head. So you could see the face and you could see this side of his body.
Got it. Did the funeral director or the person that prepared his body for burial, did you have a conversation with him as far as any of his wounds and what he saw while he was trying to make him prepared for his burial?
I did not. I'm pretty sure my Aunt Deborah did.
Go ahead.
I do know that his body was so badly bruised that we had to put a under a long sleeve Under Armour type of shirt under his jersey because it was so severely bruised. He was just bruised from head to toe. They put jeans on him. They put the undershirt and then the jersey.
What were you going to say,
Was there
Jodi?
a coroner's inquest? Do you have coroner's inquests in Oklahoma?
I'm in Texas. I have no idea what they have in Oklahoma. It's definitely been interesting as I have went into looking into some of their laws and legislations and stuff like that. I'm like, so.
In Illinois, every coroner's case has a coroner's inquest, and that inquest is attended by 12 jurors and the coroner and any witnesses. And it's just like any other trial, only it's the coroner's inquest. Mm-hmm. So you testify under oath, photographs are introduced, testimony is introduced, and at the end, the judges or the jurors, will come up with the official manner and cause of the death for the death certificate and for the case itself, at least for the coroner's case. So I was just wondering about that because maybe whoever, if there is a county coroner maybe they have some records that would help you too. Maybe they have photographs. I don't know. Maybe they
Yeah,
have
I
their
don't.
own.
The county. I mean, we're talking. I think there's like. So you're talking a very small department. Most of those counties there have small departments. So I'm just
Mhm.
guessing on that, but that's basically what was alluded to me when we were down there. But I think all that stuff was done on the state level.
Okay.
So, Ashley, you've been the investigator also in conjunction with Kathy, because I saw tons of notes and notebooks like Paula. You totally remind me of Paula. And what is the most frustrating part of all of this?
Oh gosh, a lot, really.
Yeah.
To me, okay, so they went to where the side by side was at. They picked up that side by side. They looked it over, gave it back the next day. There was no substantial evidence that there was any damage to that to show that there was a significant wreck. Like these stories talking about, oh, it was a rollover, and it did all this damage, which I do not believe at all. The fact that you went to the property just for that, and you know that that was the last known place, why wasn't there any type of investigation just throughout that little bit? I have no idea. It just,
You mean like a search warrant of a full search warrant of the house and the property?
yes. And I mean, if you were already there, why didn't you just kind of do a little step ahead and take some information on what you've seen as you're getting the side by side there. You might as well just do your own little something if you see anything abnormal. I would definitely take notes onto it, but we're
So
definitely two different people.
the side by side, did they have any information that they shared with you about it, that it was ruled out, or was there any evidence on it? Was there anything to prove that theory, that rumor that was going around?
Nope.
No.
They gave it back to the owner the very next day. So there
And
was
who-
nothing significant on there to show that there was this major accident.
Who owned the side by side? Who was it? Who?
The Newton family.
Oh, so it was Jack's family. And then when we were there, we were told by someone that was either traded away or sold shortly thereafter. That side by side, is that accurate? What we're hearing?
That's what I heard too.
Yeah.
So that was one rumor. And then did they tell you anything about DNA testing on Noah's body? Like under his fingernails, or I mean anything?
No, I was not ever told anything about any DNA testing on his body, on the shoes, on the laces of the shoes, of his armpits, of his head, anything.
Huh. Is
I
that
don't-
no? What I mean, would they do that, Jodi? Would they take DNA from the victim? At the
Well,
scene?
certainly I would be doing fingernail scrapings.
Mm.
I don't, I mean, DNA isn't as wholesome as you think it is, but I'm trying to think if there was, I mean, I would certainly be subjecting the shorts to some tests, some scientific tests.
Ashley, do you know what happened to the white shorts?
The white shorts went with the medical examiner, so
They have
they
it.
have all that.
Did they give you any information about anything on those shorts, or no?
No.
But Dalen has
I
the
mean,
black
there's
shorts.
possible DNA there.
Yeah.
Obviously, Damon has the black shorts.
Dalen, yeah. He has the black shorts.
Dalen.
Dalen. So there's possible DNA there. You know, there's not a whole lot. The shoes, there might be DNA there. I don't know whatever happened. Do we know what happened to that hat? Didn't he have a hat
Yes.
at the party?
Mm-hmm.
But
And his
do we
hat was
know-
missing.
The hat was not recovered. The shirt was not recovered. His wallet was not recovered. So we don't have that. The other, Noah's other shoe was not recovered. So
That's odd. Where was his
Really?
wallet?
Where did it go? Do you know? I mean, the
No.
police didn't take it? His
I'm
other
sure it's-
shoe?
I'm sure it's with whatever they tossed. I'm assuming. So
Did the police take the shoes he was wearing though? They have those.
yes.
Okay. And then the only thing we know from that scene that is back with the family that Dalen has are the black shorts, which he was wearing. That he has photographs and videos of him wearing pretty much the whole
Right.
weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And have those ever been examined by the lab? By the
I
crime
do
lab?
not. I don't think so.
No. We
So those should be examined by the crime lab.
yeah.
Mm.
And we just found out yesterday doing with another forensic person that we've worked with before. She did this whole study in 2019 where they said that you can't get information off of clothing if you wash it, and they did a study and they said you can get information off washed clothing. So because I know when they got it, we're not sure that we had the shorts were given from Jack to Dalen, so we don't know what happened in that transfer of information because you don't, that's one thing that's kind of
Well,
screwed up. And then Dalen, when he brought him home, his wife, washed them too. So
Wash the black
But-
shorts.
washed the black shorts. But we've since discovered through our research that you still can get information off those shorts.
But okay, so the black shorts, it would be nice to know, were they damaged in any way? I mean, we know that he was naked when law enforcement got there, right?
Yes.
But Caden said he had black shorts on when he saw him.
mm.
So
Yeah.
So we don't know. I mean, Ashley, what else at the scene bothered you, like with evidence or whatever? I mean, was there anything else that you wanted to ask Jodi about the process or what?
Overall, knowing the things that you do know, the autopsy report, the scene itself, when it does come to the autopsy report, I think like some things that were kind of questioning for me was like the air that was in the spine and in the brain area, and those damages that were done to his spine. I know on Joseph Scott Morgan's podcast, he had said that the damage to that spine and the things that's not common at all unless it was done by hanging. So I kind of wanted your thoughts onto that.
I don't think he was hung. I don't think that's even indicative of a hanging. The hanging would damage the upper neck,
Mhm.
the upper spine, but
Right.
it would not break his shoulder blades. It would not break his thoracic. It would not in cervical. It wouldn't do that. It would.
Mhm.
It basically breaks the neck and then would suffocate. So I wouldn't think he was hung. I mean, I don't want to
I think
rule
that's what
anything
he
out.
was trying to get across was like that's what people look like if they were hung, like to give somebody an example in the real world of things.
No, I've seen lots of
no.
hangings, and they don't have that kind of injury. That
Well,
all the way down. You just don't see that. That was
What do you think could have caused those kinds of injuries?
I honestly, I mean, it's to me, it's a crushing. It's like a crushing injury. I think there might be different stages to this. I'm not sure that it all occurred at the same place at the same time, but it occurred in close proximity to each other. And I'm just wondering if maybe he incurred the head injury and maybe some other injuries, and then they tried to make it look like a hit and run by running over him. But even then, you should see some kind of indication that there's tread marks, that there's, grass and dirt in the injuries. I'm not exactly sure, but I just don't think, and I don't even see on the autopsy, like, to me, when I see his injuries kind of all around his torso, I wondered, was he drugged for some
That's what I was going
distance
to say.
on gravel or whatever? But I don't see any ligature marks described in the autopsy report where they would have to tie him to something to drag
Exactly.
him. And I don't see where those are mentioned on his ankles, on his neck, on his wrists. I don't see anything like that. So I'm confused as to how he got those. But the fact that I don't see any type of defense wounds on his extremities just makes me think that he incurred a massive injury that probably at least knocked him unconscious, if didn't kill him. And then shortly thereafter, something else, they tried to make it look like more. I mean, that's just what I think, but I don't know. I'm not sure.
What's really interesting, we were just at the scene this past weekend, like twice.
Mhm.
And so seeing where his body was, you have the street, which is the street level. And then right off the street, it kind of dips down and it goes up towards and then it levels off. And then there's railroad tracks. And there's there's pretty decent sized railroad tracks. You have, rocks, railroad tracks, railroad tires. And then on the other side of it dips down again, then it's farmland, So if, let's just say, for hypothetically, he was drugged, they were goofing around in the side-by-side driving through the field, and he fell off the back of it or fell out of it and got his leg hooked on something, was dragged, and his back of his head hit like a rock or something like that. But to me, if he was dragged over those railroad tracks, that would cause a lot of, scrapes and other kind of things to his arms and stuff like that. But the way his body, everyone describes this, it was just kind of dumped on the side of the road. And It was like he was on his side, slightly twisted, not in a fetal position, but his legs were bent and they were twisted. So it doesn't look like, it looks like he was just placed there.
Well, the thing that kind of bothers me about this is the bilateral type injuries to his upper body and the multiple fractures of both his shoulder blades and his, up and down his spine, including his ribs. His heart was avulged or was lacerated, or one chamber was lacerated. And then you have liver damage, which is lacerations. And remember, those aren't cuts. Those are splits. Those are crushing types. So it just almost seems to me like something came down on him almost, if he was face down, almost squarely on his back, and just everything broke from the inside out. It's just what I think it sounds like to me, but once again, it's just very hard to determine without actually seeing the body and seeing the injuries. But to have all of those bilateral, almost identical injuries on both sides, breaking both shoulder blades and his spine, the air in the brain and his spine is just caused from the opening, and the nature of the injury. It just was massive injury. I do agree. I've never seen a beating, a physical beating that had this many injuries like that. These are massive injuries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Including the teeth.
Yeah. Caused by great force. I don't know if a punch or even a stomp. I mean, I don't know for sure. And I'd hate to say one way or the other, but I I kind of think there was one injury and then the rest came after that, maybe in a cover-up type. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I
Or if it
don't
was
think he
just
was hung from anything.
no, I don't think he was either. And I think, to me, I think it was an accident and they're trying to cover it up and no one wants to come forward.
And that just makes, I mean, I don't know. Ashley, what do you think about that theory? I don't think
I don't think
that.
it was an accident.
I
at
don't
all.
either.
Because if it was an accident, they have their phones with them
Right.
all the time. So if they're horse playing and just pressing the limit on whether it was riding around in the bed of a vehicle or riding around on that side by side, where's your evidence to support that?
No,
They don't have it.
They don't
And
have
there's no
anything.
damage to the side by side. So, and it's all made of plastic. So I don't see it at all.
Well, the other thing
doesn't
too
make
is just when we saw the distance between where his body was found and the house, we actually saw the physical distance. It's pretty far. And him walking off by himself.
No, I don't believe that. Not with the size of that corn. No way. I don't believe that.
And everybody that we've talked to,
I just
friends of
don't.
him,
Yeah, I
said
don't.
Noah would never do that.
Do you think he would have done that? Ashley just walked off like that?
No,
No.
not at all.
Well,
No.
the other thing, his shoes, both shoes had grass and dirt in them. That's you don't get that usually from just walking around.
No.
That's something that happens. You're rolling around in it. You're being drugged through it. That's not something that indicates some kind of a struggle to me that happened at some point. There was some movement that caused grass and dirt to go into his shoes. I don't know how much was in there, but it did mention that. And the other thing that really bothers me is it just does not make sense to me, the contradictions between him being naked and him having shorts on, the white shorts versus the black shorts, the just coming upon the scene at, the timing of the fishing trip and all that. It just, something is rotten to me in that whole first 2 hours, basically.
Mm-hmm.
What'd you say, Ashley?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, it's just not.
If I could only bring her here, I'd be like, here you go.
I know.
Yeah, there's a lot of possibilities here. I don't understand it. I mean, thinking something and proving it are two different things.
Exactly.
But there's a lot of people involved here. And if there's a murder involved, everybody who's involved could be charged with murder.
Yes.
Hmm.
Sure.
So if I were one of the people on the outside looking in, I sure as heck would not want to be in that roundup.
No.
And don't you think, Ashley, that you guys are closer than you were and you're getting closer every day to finding out what happened?
Yes. More and more has came to the surface.
Mm-hmm.
So,
No, I mean, there's a lot of stuff.
I've definitely done a lot of digging. I think like all my time goes into this. I mean, I know all my time goes into this. So I have for sure went down this deep dive, and I utilize different resources. So it's all. It seems like it's all kind of coming together. I feel like it's making more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we can only hope that, it's also coming together for law enforcement too. And they're just putting together a strong case before they can actually, hopefully, make some arrests and charges. Hopefully that can happen. But it just always makes me nervous when cases get like, we're coming up on to the 11th month since it's happened. We're coming up almost on the year anniversary coming up at the end of this month.
From the information, and we're not going to divulge it here, that we've learned this week, they're very close to understanding what happened that night. And I think that it's going to come out soon.
Right.
Great.
Yeah.
And I think
Hope so.
with Molly's case, and I started from ground zero with that. And it's it is like the blueprint, like we had discussed
Yeah.
when you guys were here. And I do talk to Paula kind of frequently as well. And I'm like, hey, this, whatever. And I pick her brain as well. And I just keep going.
Yeah.
And it shows a lot of similarities. For it to
Yeah.
be completely two different cases
Right.
and two different timing and just all the things, there's a lot of similarities.
Yeah.
Well, the things that bother me about the scene are obviously the shorts, this whole question about the shorts, the tooth. Ashley, I mean, did they ever say anything to you about the teeth? Like, were they? No.
No.
It's very
Nothing was
strange to
said
me.
about the tooth specifically, but it's I don't want to overindulge onto some stuff, but there were some things said about who picked up the tooth
Yeah.
and what they felt.
Mm-hmm. I just think there's all these things, and maybe because it is a small town, and they just kind of do things the way they do them. I just don't. There's a lot of things here that I just don't think would have been done in other places. Like, for example, the tooth, Jodi. What would anyone have been touching anything that was on the ground near Noah in any of your cases?
No, not if I was there. They wouldn't. No.
Civilian and or law enforcement.
No, no one. When we worked at crime scene, we were the masters of our crime scene. Nobody came or went without our approval, and we certainly didn't have people running around inside them picking up stuff or touching it or moving it. No, that tooth would have laid there until I picked it up or photographed it and then picked it up. And it doesn't. For me, if it was in close proximity to his body, I am not surprised that if he took if his body moved a certain way and he took a certain injury, because he did have some injuries to his face, not excessive, but he did have some, that it could have come out if his head snapped over or whatever. But I would certainly, that would be evidence that I would want to pick up and make sure I knew where that came from, see if it was fractured in any way, indicating any type of a blow. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely a piece of evidence that should have been processed accordingly.
And the chain, didn't Deborah give him that chain?
Yes. So the necklace did come from his grandmother.
Did they test it for any kind of anything? Do you know?
Not that I'm aware of. In the autopsy report, it speaks very. It doesn't go into any great detail. It says that it was there. That's it.
Would they have said anything else in the report, Jodi, about these little things that were found at the scene, like the chain, like it was on Noah's neck and then it wasn't. It was on the ground.
Right. I mean, that could be tested for touch DNA. Definitely. So that would have been turned over to the police for the crime lab, I would assume.
Do the police have the chain, or do you guys have the chain back?
I think the medical examiner has the chain.
Okay. Well, at
Unless
least
like they
it's there.
sent it to OHP. I don't know like how that stuff.
So they
kinda
took it,
works.
yeah.
Yeah, it's in.
I mean, there isn't a whole lot of anything here that wasn't overwhelming anybody with evidence. I would be testing everything I could possibly test at this point.
Interesting. All right, ladies. We really appreciate your time, Ashley and Jodi. I'm sure we'll continue this conversation as this case progresses and hopefully in the right direction. But I know Ashley's not going to give up, and we're not giving up. And Jodi's always at our side. She doesn't give up. Every time I ask her a question, I get emails and photographs. She analyzes things, so it's great to have that resource. And you're getting more resources that are coming at you, so hopefully they'll all kind of come together and we can find some answers and find out what happened to Noah.